Hey guys, welcome to Bloodlines. I'm Olvaar. So in this video, I wanted to talk a bit about how to make a decent build for this game. There's been a lot of people asking me if the build they're running is good or not. I honestly think you should just use the build you have more fun with, but I'll give you some basic ideas on how to make a good build. You can deviate from the guidelines I'm going to give you and still make a good or even better build, but if you follow them, you won't be completely forced to wipe like I did when I started playing Bloodlines. So let's go over the basics first, in case you're new to the game. You unlock skill paths by breaking chakra points. You'll need 100 Rio and a chakra fragment, which you can get by doing quests or global events. After you break a chakra point, you'll get a chakra shard. You can use this item to open up a skill path. You're limited to 4 skill paths, or 5 if you're an otsutsuki. Some of these skill paths are what I like to call combat skill paths. Blinding Strike, Greatsword Training, Kunai Throw, Twin Strike, and Weighted Kick. You will need a combat scroll to unlock them, and you can only choose one of them. The rest of the skill paths will knock you out of getting a different one. For the elemental skill paths, on top of needing a chakra shard, you will also need a gem. You can find these gems around the map by breaking corrupted chakra points or as part of the drop pool of some of the bosses in the game. Other skill paths, like improved stomach, which I've already covered in the fruit summoning guide, will require special items to unlock. You will need a scroll to unlock some of the skills. I've covered how to get most of them in my beginner's guide, but I will go over all of them in future videos. The first thing you want to consider when making a build is what clan you are. You can check by pressing M and looking at your inventory. Some clans have their clan abilities or passive skills locked behind the skill path. If you're an Uzumaki, you want to pick up the ceiling skill path. If you're a Hoshigaki, you want to choose the water skill path. If you're a Rui, you want to go lightning. Not choosing these paths if you're one of these clans is basically the equivalent of not having a clan at all. I don't recommend you do this, especially since besides having their clan abilities tied to certain skill paths, they also do more damage with them. Other clans just do more damage with certain skill paths, but they don't get locked out of their clan abilities if you don't choose the skill path they have an affinity with. Uchiha does more damage with fire. Senju does more damage with earth. Lee does more damage with the weighted kick skill path, also known as taijutsu. And Otsutsuki get blood weapons, which do increased bleed. You can go taijutsu as an Otsutsuki, and you can choose a different element to fire with an Uchiha. You won't be making the most out of these clans if you do, but you won't be locked out of getting clan progression. And there's definitely some great builds with these clans that don't include these skill paths. If you're Lee, I recommend you get taijutsu. If you're Senju, I recommend you get earth. These clans don't have progression yet, and they're not very good if you don't pick the skill path they have an affinity with. The rest of the clans don't have elemental or combat affinity, so you have way more flexibility on the type of build you can go. The second thing you should consider when making a build is what type of dash you're going to use. There's 2 skill paths that give you access to a special dash. Improved stamina gives you access to flicker step, and the lightning skill path gives you access to lightning dodge. Unlocking one of these locks you out of using the other one forever. I think flicker step is the better special dash out of the 2. So much so that even when I'm going lightning, I make sure to still pick up the stamina skill path. If you want to play it safe, I recommend you always get flicker step. There's some good builds that use lightning dodge instead of flicker step, and there's even some builds that make full use of the agile trait and don't get a dash at all. But if you're new to the game, it's probably best to not try such unique builds. Like I mentioned before, choosing one combat skill path locks you out of the rest, so you have to choose carefully. If you're Lee, I strongly recommend you go taijutsu. If you're Otsutsuki, I recommend you choose any of the weapon skill paths so you can make use of blood weapons. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that you want to choose an element and a combat skill path that complement each other. For example, weapons like Spear and Greatsword that have slow M1 attacks pair well with the lightning skill path, since it has a lot of attacks that stun other players, making it easier to land your M1 attacks. Kunai also goes well with lightning, since you can combine the fast M1s with lightning attacks to build up bleed quickly. Sword and taijutsu work pretty well with almost any element, since they have moves that allow you to set up combos pretty easily with a variety of elements. The only combination I haven't personally tried is sword and wind. That might not work well with most builds. If you've been following the guide so far, you should have a combat skill path, the improved stamina path, and your elements of choice. For the majority of builds, your 4th skill path should be the chakra skill path. The reason for this is mainly chakra exchange. With this skill, you can get a lot of chakra for a small amount of health. There's two basic exceptions to this. If you don't have a friend or an alt account that has the improved stomach skill path to summon life fruits for you, it's better to use this fourth skill path to go fruit summoning. It's always better to not wipe than to be able to outlast some of your opponents. If you're an Uzumaki, you need to get the sealing skill path. So that, plus a combat skill path, the stamina skill path, and your element of choice means you won't have enough skill paths left to get chakra exchange or fruit summoning. There's people that recommend going kunai, sealing, stamina, and chakra as an Uzumaki. I personally never tried it, so go that build at your own risk. I think it's just better to wait until you find a chakra fruit and get chakra exchange as your fifth skill path. The reason I recommend going chakra exchange in most cases is that in the current meta, chakra doesn't regenerate very fast. So if you have a second element, you'll run out of chakra very quickly. Keep in mind though that if this ever changes in a future update and chakra regeneration gets a big buff, it might possibly be better to run two elements at once. Even now, it's completely viable to get two elements if you're good at managing your chakra. If you're going this route, pick two elements that complement each other. Don't just pick two elements at random. Think carefully on what that second element brings to the table. I'll give you an example. Fire has good damage, good combos, and good range attacks, but it lacks in mobility and it doesn't have that many good close range attacks, so wind is a good second element for it. Not only does it have a good mobility skill, but you can master Wind Tornado to attack players at close range. And while they're ragdolled, you can start casting a high damage attack like Twin Dragon Flames. If you're an Otsutsuki, you have access to a fifth skill path. I recommend you get a second element or a second utility skill path. Utility skill paths are the following: Improved Stomach, Chakra Exchange, Sealing, Summoning, Healing, and Clones. To make it more simple to understand what I'm talking about, I'll give you an example of a simple yet effective Otsutsuki build you can use. For your combat skill path, you want to go kunai. It has good mobility and does a lot of M1 damage, especially since you will have the blood weapon passive as an Otsutsuki. You're going to use Flicker Step, so you want to get improved stamina. Like we mentioned, kunai goes well with lightning, so that's going to be your element of choice. You want to pick up Chakra Exchange for your fourth skill path. Even with moon reacts, it's still worth taking. And for your fifth skill path, you want to choose a second utility skill path like healing. Unless you're running a support build, you should be mastering an elemental skill in most cases. Obviously, there's exceptions to this, but these are pretty safe skills to master. If you go fire, you want to master Twin Dragon Flames. If you go water, you want to master Water Dragon. If you go wind, you want to master Wind Tornado. For earth, you want to master Smoldering Earth. And finally, if you go lightning, you want to master Lightning Ripple. So yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments what build you recommend.